Supreme Court is not choosing to weigh in quickly. Trump's team will now argue its case before a 3-judge panel on the Federal Appeals Court. Oral arguments in that appeal begin January 9th. If those judges rule against Trump, he can still appeal to the full D.C. Appeals Court, what is known as an en banc ruling. And if he loses again with the full court, he can take up the issue with the Supreme Court again. What that all means for the trial's scheduled March 4th start date is anyone's guess. Joining me now is Josh Gerstein, senior legal affairs reporter at Politico, and Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney in the Northern District of Alabama and now an MSNBC legal analyst. Josh and Joyce, thank you for joining me. Joyce, I'm eager to hear your sort of thoughts and analysis about the Supreme Court decision and just how problematic it is potentially for that March 4th start date.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question, Alex, and it's very hard to give a meaningful answer because there are so many moving parts and so many variables. This could just be a blip on the radar screen. It's possible, and Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court to be prepared to take this case immediately after the Court of Appeals decides it. So in an optimistic view, the Court of Appeals could move quickly, the Supreme Court could jump right in, and there could be a fast decision. But that's far from assured. And there's a much, I think, for people who would like to see this case tried before the election, there's a much darker path where the Court of Appeals takes a little bit more time. Trump expends the 45 days that he gets to ask for the rehearing en banc that you just asked for. He then gets 90 days to apply to the Supreme Court for certiorari. And there's no guarantee that they would move fast. They could move slowly. We could be theoretically looking at a situation where they don't decide the case until late June or early July. And we just don't know how this will go or if there's some in-between path. But the one sort of ray of hope that I see in today's decision, we don't know what the court's thinking is. It's just one sentence. But there are no recorded dissents. And if there was some feeling of doom on the court that Donald Trump was going to escape responsibility at the hands of the Supreme Court, I think we would have seen dissents from some of the liberal justices. And the fact that we didn't see those today gives me just a wee bit of hope.
Josh, I know there's been a lot of speculation about how the court is going to rule on any number of items that are issues that appear on its horizon, whether it's the 14th Amendment appeal that is coming as a result of the Colorado State Supreme Court, or the question of obstruction of justice that's coming from one of the January 6th defendants that in turn may affect some of the same charges that Donald Trump is facing. Do you think I know I'm asking you to read tea leaves here, but do you think that there's any sort of effect that this decision will have on those other decisions that the court could take up?
Well, I think it's very rare, Alex, for the court or the justices to acknowledge any interplay like that. But we do know that sometimes that does happen in cases. I think back to the Obamacare case where it looked like some votes might have been traded there on two different aspects of that case. And so I could see a situation here, and I think a lot of legal analysts have said that this is possible, where the Supreme Court ultimately does allow some trial of former President Trump to go forward, a criminal trial, but, puts other issues like this 14th Amendment issue, which to many people I think is potentially more explosive, the notion of knocking Trump off the ballot in a lot of different states, maybe doesn't allow that to happen, but does allow the trials to occur. So it's hard to know what's going on behind the scenes, except as Joyce says, there may be other reasons. If there was consensus on this at the court, we don't know if it was 5-4 or 9-0. But, they have been discussing, Alex, you showed that graphic a couple of times of all those decisions in the last few years where they agreed to accelerate cases. There's been a lot of dissension about that issue. And so perhaps this is one camp in that debate sending a signal to another camp in that debate, and hard as it may be to believe, it's not totally about Trump in this particular instance.
It's just about factionalism on the court. Reassuring, not really. Joyce, all eyes now turn to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, right? That court has been handling this case and this iteration of this case fairly expeditiously. Oral arguments start January 9th. But I think it took them 20 months to decide the presidential immunity defense in the civil case against Trump. Do you have any reason to believe, A, that it's going to take that long, or B, that they'll permit this stay to remain in place, which is effectively frozen all of the pretrial movement that is kind of necessary to keep the